Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Autel Evo 2
Pro versus the Mavic 3. Stay tuned.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If this is the first time to my channel, please don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell, doesn't cost you anything. Today we'll be looking into the Autel Evo 2 Pro versus the Mavic 3. Ken and me was flying that thing around, and let's get started. First off, build quality. What do I think about it? I think that the Mavic 3 falls a little bit short on build quality. The first time, in my first impression having it in my hands, I think that the Mavic 2 Pro was a way better build. And premium wise, I think the Autel Evo 2 is still built better than the Mavic 3.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with 808 on that. I feel like the build quality on the Mavic 3 just falls a little bit short of expectations when you think of a premium drone. When you pick it up, you sort of get a solid, robust feeling. You don't really get that with the Mavic 3. The top shell feels very fragile, and when you pick up the Evo 2, it feels thick, it feels durable, and I can attest to the fact that the build quality on the Mavic 3 isn't nowhere near what it was on the Mavic 2 Pro. I've already crashed this unit once. I had an issue, popped the gimbal out, got a lot of superficial scratches on the unit. Nothing that's really hindering flight capability, but it's just something that you don't want to deal with when you're paying $2,100 for a drone.
Correct. Which brings me to performance. Performance-wise, I have to give it to the Mavic 3 because after watching it yesterday, flying throughout the time that we had on the beach, the Mavic 3 was way more solid in the air. While I had some drifting and wear-off issues with my drone, the Autel, we stayed there, we tried to get the shot, and my drone was moving around a lot. And the wind wasn't even that strong.
No, the wind was about 20 miles, maybe 15 miles an hour, and which should be more than adequate for both of these drones to compensate and handle. But continuously throughout the day, I watched the Autel struggle to try to counteract the winds as to where the Mavic just maintained level. It looked calm, it looked steady. It just really wasn't breaking a sweat. Now, as far as overall flight characteristics during performance, you have to do a lot less tweaking right out of the gate to get the Mavic 3 to fly correctly or fly smoothly, to be able to capture that shot that you want, as to where with the Autel, I always found like I had to put in a little bit extra work to tune my expos, to tune my gains, to really get it flying right. It's not a big deal for some, but for some, they just want to know that a drone's going to fly great straight out of the box.
Which also brings me to that we at first thought that I was bringing interference to his controller, and he lost a couple times connection.
Yes, I did. I did lose connection a few times, and I think it's been documented that people have been losing connection with the Mavic 3 recently, so I think there's still some firmware tuning. But even with those disconnects, I still feel like the performance was pretty solid on the Mavic 3.
Yeah. Which brings me to battery life. Battery life itself, I would say that the Mavic 3 has more battery life and it has more power during the flight, because looking at that, this is only a 5,000 milliamp unit and this is a 7,100 milliamp unit. I think it's the weight that kills the Evo 2 Pro faster.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily weight. I think it's efficiency. I think this is where DJI really strives with software refinement. Software refinement really excels with the Mavic 3 when it comes to battery life. We have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. We really don't know enough about these batteries. With the Evo 2, we know a bit more about the battery. Yes, it's a huge hunking battery, which makes this thing very, very heavy, but it also makes the Mavic 3 a lot more efficient in the air. Now, keep in mind, we don't have the Evo 2 version 2, which had the longer props and the larger motors, which could in turn render better flight times. I know I was seeing better flight times with the Evo 2 version 2, but with that said, we do have to give the nod in favor of the Mavic 3 as far as flight times go, just because I was averaging about 36 to 35 minutes of flight time, while this, in my experience, I'm getting 27 to 28 minutes, and you concurred with me on that.
Yeah, 27, 28, depending on the weather. Sometimes up to 31 if there's no wind at all.
Now, yesterday we didn't have full charges on these batteries, so we couldn't do a direct head-to-head comparison as far as battery life goes, but it's definitely safe to say the Mavic 3 is going to edge out the Evo 2 Pro in battery life.
That's correct. Which brings me over to image quality. And image quality, man, I was impressed by the Mavic 3. I really was. But looking straight at it on the computer, because at first we was looking at it through what, you had the iPhone?
Yeah, I had the iPhone.
So I was looking through my Triple Tech 7, and my colors were kind of washed out on the screen itself, but once we uploaded it to the computers and we looked at it right next to it, it was quite the opposite. The power of the Evo 2 Pro is no slouch in comparison to the Mavic 3. I like the natural colors on the Mavic 3 though, while mine's one had a magenta shift in it. Besides that, we have sharpening issues. So while I thought after flying it for 8,500 miles in total, I'm used to the Evo 2 Pro, I thought my sharpening was always on spot and it was really good. After seeing the Mavic 3, the sharpening was kind of softer and you had to add on sharpening, which made the image look better though. Because for me to tone down the sharpening, usually my imaging does not come quite as good as the Mavic 3.
Yeah, so something that we need to clarify too in that test that we did with the image comparison is the fact that the sharpness was turned all the way down on the Evo 2 Pro. Another thing to consider when we're talking about sharper images is, was the apertures apples to apples? And chances are during those testing they weren't. We're dealing with a micro four thirds sensor as opposed to on the Evo 2 Pro it has a 1-inch sensor, so the apertures aren't going to line up 1-to-1. Sometimes on these smaller sensors, the more you stop down with light, the less sharp things get. I find the sweet spot for the Mavic 3 is about f5 to f4. You're going to get a reasonable amount of sharpness. And on the Evo 2 Pro, anywhere from f4 to f3, you'll get a pretty solid amount of sharpening. So it's going to be subjective as far as sharpness and color goes, but I still personally prefer the more natural look and the subdued look of the Mavic 3. I know a lot of people want it out of the image camera and are out of the box camera just straight off the SD card. And if somebody's looking for that, I think the Evo 2 is the better choice if you want just like a straight off the SD card look.
Straight off the SD card look, I cannot say that the Evo 2 Pro is way better than Mavic 3.
Right.
Because after looking at it with the Mavic 3, you after all have a bigger field of view too, which is with the micro four thirds. The bigger field of view is a lot. By a lot. I have to fly about 50 feet higher than you in order to get the same field of view. And comparing it with the 6K versus the 5.1K and the micro four thirds versus the 1-inch, I actually have to give it to the Mavic 3. Image quality wise, I like it better. Looking at it in general though, for working on it, and after I have been working on it, I still love my Evo 2 Pro.
I think the price to value when it comes to image, the Evo does have a slight advantage when it comes to the price point, to the value that you get with the image. It does work. Yes, you do have to do a little bit of work in post to make the Evo image even come close to that of the Mavic 3, but it gets there. It gets there with a little bit of effort. But still, I prefer less sharp images, I think, overall. I think to me that's more appealing. Something I always struggled with real estate was that field of view on the Evo. It's so tight. It's almost a dramatic tightness as to where, like you said, the Mavic 3 has just got a wide field of view.
It's like a super wide. And there is a
wider
angle.
Yeah, there's actually wider, and I can't even believe it. I can't even believe that. Yeah. Who would want wider? But there you go. So that's sort of the first impressions thoughts comparing these two to one another. There will be more videos coming up very soon. I don't know necessarily Evo to Mavic 3, maybe if people say yes, but we'll sort of see what we can come up with.
I fly my Evo 2 against that Mavic 3 any day. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, COVID-19 is still out there to get you. Be a nice human. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Aloha, everybody.
Stay original.